Hey there, members of the Night Crew, and folks who just love horror. Welcome to the Night Crew podcast, where shadows breathe and monsters listen. This is the podcast where we get cozy with the creepy, the frightening, and the just plain undead. I'm your host, Brad Ricks. Now, quick updates before we jump into part 5 of the Succubus series. I intended for this to just be 4 episodes, but I decided to add a 5th. So think of this as a bonus. All right, first, a couple quick brags that I have. I was at an event in Oklahoma City and got to meet Jason Patrick, Michael from the Lost Boys. Awesome guy. Gave him a copy of The Night Crew because, of course I would. He also signed 2 copies for me. So Michael signed 2 of my books. The Night Crew, whose main character is also named Michael. Coincidence? Yeah, not at all. All right, second, I was at another event in San Antonio that was Walking Dead themed. It had a number of actors from The Walking Dead there, including Chandler Riggs, Michael Rooker, Josh McDermott, Michael Cutlitz, and a whole bunch of others. I got to be the host of the actors panel. It was a blast to do. They are a great group of individuals and are absolutely hilarious. All right, enough about that. As normal, my little reminders, signed books and merch are over at bradricks.com. Night Crew 3 Hunting Ground, it released a couple weeks ago. Get your copy if you haven't already. And don't forget Dead Mountain, which comes out in October. Go order that now. Last, join my Facebook group. I am very, very terrible about doing newsletters, so I decided, hey, this Facebook group, this is where you're going to be able to get updates and do, all that kind of stuff from me. So it's Brad Ricks' Book Crypt. Become a crypt dweller. It's a fun place to share horror recommendations, rave about my books, or anybody's books really, and anything else horror related you'd like to talk about. All right, let's get started. Now, like I said, technically the Succubus series wrapped on the last time. I had planned 4 episodes. Lilith to the modern bedroom. This nice, good, clean arc. Let's roll some credits. But I told you I wasn't quite done yet, and I meant it, because all the way back in episode 1, I name dropped something and then sprinted right past it. I mentioned that in certain Kabbalistic traditions, there are 4 queens of demons. And everybody always talks about one of them, Lilith. Lilith, she gets the books and the movies and the merchandise, that the whole kind of spotlight. But there were 3 others standing like right behind her. And today, those 3 get their episode. Naamah, Agrat Bat Mahlat, and Eisheth Zenunim, the other queens. The ones who don't get the t-shirts, once you learn what they are and what they do, you're going to wonder why Lilith's been hogging the stage the whole time. Because these 3 are, in some ways, even stranger than she is. Now, also, if you have read The Night Crew 2, you'll recognize all these names. Now, fair warning, we are wading into some Kabbalah, which is some of the deepest and most complicated mystical material in the Western tradition. I am a horror podcaster and writer. I'm not a rabbi. And I'm going to say that more than once, so nobody mistakes me for an authority that I'm not. I know creatures and that kind of stuff. When you start getting into some mystic traditions and all that, I just repeat what I read. Now, I'm going to talk the broad strokes of these 3 figures, and really they're just genuinely fascinating, and they deserve the light. So let's meet the queens. All right, first, let's set the stage. Because to understand these 3, you have to understand the world they come from. In Jewish mysticism, particularly in the medieval Kabbalistic texts, the most famous of which is the Zohar, written or compiled in 13th century Spain. There's a concept that the spiritual world has 2 sides. There's the holy side, associated with the divine, with light, with order. And there's a shadow side, a dark mirror. In Kabbalah, this dark side has a name, the Sitra Achra, which translates roughly to the other side. And I'm going to say other side because you guys know how I am when it comes to, saying words that I don't know how to pronounce. And just as the holy side has its hierarchy of angels and divine emanations, the other side has its own structure, its own court, its own royalty. And At the top of that dark court sit the queens. Different texts give different numbers and different names, and folklore is messy, and Kabbalah is even messier than most. But a commonly cited grouping names 4. Lilith, who we've covered, and then Naamah, Agrat Bat Mahlat, and Eisheth Zenunim. In some traditions, these 4 are described as consorts of Samael, Samael being a major figure on the other side, sometimes identified with Satan, sometimes as a distinct dark angel, the venom of God, the great accuser. So you've got Samael as a kind of dark king, and these 4 are his queens. Though, and this is important, these women are not just accessories to Samael. In the lore, they have their own power, their own domains, their own followings of lesser demons. They are not his servants. They are sovereigns in their own right. And in several texts, they're depicted as rivals, both to each other and sometimes to him. And here's the little detail I love. The one that makes this whole thing kind of feel less like a list and more like a story. These 4 queens aren't redundant. They're not 4 versions of the same monster. Each one governs a different domain of human vulnerability. Lilith takes the night and the infant, and the other split up the rest of the territory between them. By the time you've met all 4, they've got the whole human condition carved up like a map. There is nowhere you're safe, because each queen owns a different one of your weaknesses. So let's meet the 3 who don't get the spotlight. And let's start with the one whose name you might actually have heard before in very different context. So the first, Naamah. The name itself means pleasant or pleasing, which for a demon queen is either deeply ironic or extremely on brand, depending on how you look at it. Here's where it gets confusing, and I want to be upfront about it because honesty is the whole brand here. There are actually at least 2 Naamahs in Jewish tradition, and people mix them up constantly. There's a Naamah mentioned in the book of Genesis, a human woman, a descendant of Cain, sister of Tubal-Cain, perfectly mortal, and then there's the demon queen, Naamah of the Kabbalistic tradition. Now, some texts treat these as totally separate figures who happen to share a name. Other texts, and this is the juicier version, suggest they're connected, that the human Naamah was so seductive, so associated with corruption, that she either became or merged with the demonic figure. Folklore does this all the time. It's bad at keeping its characters in separate boxes. And I kind of find that a little fun. Genealogists probably find it infuriating, though. So the demon queen Naamah is, in the Kabbalistic material, a seductress. Like Lilith and the Lilim, she's associated with visiting men in their sleep, with nocturnal emissions, with the birth of demonic offspring. So far, so Succubus. But Naamah has a couple of specialties that set her apart. The first is that she's strongly associated with seduction as corruption, not just the act, but the spiritual fall that comes with it. There's a tradition that Naamah, along with Lilith, was responsible for leading astray the Watchers, the fallen angels of the book of Enoch, the ones who came down to earth and took human wives and fathered the Nephilim, the giants. In this reading, Naamah isn't just preying on sleeping men. She's the one who corrupted angels. She's operating at the celestial level. That's a pretty serious resume. The second specialty, and this one's darker, is that some traditions associate Naamah with strangulation, particularly of infants, and with a kind of madness or epilepsy in children. Like Lilith, she's tied to the deaths of the very young. There's a recurring idea in this material that the demon queens take a special interest in newborns, and Naamah is named among them, which connects her right back to the oldest layer of the whole series, the Mesopotamian Lilith, 4,000 years ago, harming infants in the night. The detail survives across the entire span of the tradition, from clay tablet to the Kabbalah. The thread really never breaks. So Naamah The pleasant one, seductress, corrupter of angels, and a threat to the cradle. She earns her crown. Now, my personal favorite of the three, Agrat Bat Mahlat. The name means roughly Agrat, daughter of Mahlat. So she's the queen of the demons who ride out into the night. Agrat is, in some traditions, specifically the queen of the demons that swarm on certain nights of the week and certain nights of the year. There's a striking tradition in the Talmud and later texts that on Wednesday nights and Sabbath eves, Agrat Bat Mahlat rides out with a host of destroying demons. Some texts put the number at tens of thousands, 18 myriads of destroying angels in one famous reference. She leads them through the air. And on those particular nights, the old tradition says, you do not want to be out alone. The air itself is dangerous. The space between places is dangerous. She owns the open dark, the way Lilith owns the bedroom. So, if Lilith is the threat indoors, the one who comes to your bed, Agrat is the threat outdoors, the one who owns the road, the crossroads, the empty field at midnight, the sky itself on the wrong night of the week. Between the two of them, you're covered front and back. Inside, Lilith. Outside, Agrat. There's no good place to be. There's a wonderful detail in the rabbinic tradition about Agrat being confronted. There's a story where a famous sage encounters her, and she has the power to do real harm. But through the merit and reputation of righteous men, her power gets curtailed. She's restricted to just those specific nights, Wednesdays and Sabbath eves, rather than having free run of every night of the week, which tells you something about these stories' function. They're not just scary, they're also instructional. They come with a built-in defense. The lesson is always the same in this tradition. The dark has a schedule, and if you know the schedule and you live rightly, you can stay out of its way. Folklore is rarely just horror. It's usually horror plus a survival manual. Agrat also gets tied in some of the later mystical genealogies into a whole family tree of demons. Daughter of one demon figure, mother or grandmother of others, consort of Samael in certain texts, the genealogies contradict each other constantly because, again, multiple authors, multiple centuries, no editor keeping the family tree straight. But the through line is consistent. Agrat Bat Mahlat is the queen of the riding demons, the mistress of the dangerous night, the one in the air above the road. I think she's the most cinematic of the three by like a mile. A demon queen leading a host of 18 myriads of destroyers across the night sky on a Wednesday. I mean, somebody should put that on a screen. I keep saying that in this series, and I really keep meaning it. If, again, the Night Crew is out there if anybody wants to make a movie out of it. Thank you. All right, in the third of our trio, Eisheth Zenunim. Eisheth, I think is how it's supposed to be pronounced, but okay, I'll correct it. Eisheth Zenunim. The name translates to something like woman of whoredom or woman of harlotry. The Kabbalists were not subtle with their naming conventions. Whatever else you can say about medieval mystics, they really don't bury the lead, do they? Eisheth is, in the Kabbalistic material, one of the four mothers of demons, and she's strongly associated with sacred prohibition and forbidden union. But the detail that sets Eisheth apart is what she's said to consume. Several traditions describe Eisheth as a devourer of the souls of the damned. Not bodies, not blood, souls. There's a tradition that the souls of certain sinners, rather than continuing on to whatever comes next, are instead consumed by Eisheth, absorbed, ended. That is a fundamentally different kind of horror than anything else in this series. Lilith takes your night. Naamah takes your child. Agrat takes the road. Eisheth takes the part of you that was supposed to survive your death. And kind of sit with that one for a minute. Because in a tradition that believes in an afterlife, in the survival of the soul, the worst possible fate isn't death, it's not getting to continue. And Eisheth is the queen who represents exactly that. The ending of the thing that was supposed to be able to end. And it's the ending of the thing that wasn't supposed to be able to end. She's the deepest cut of the four. Eisheth also gets woven into the broader genealogy, consort of Samael in some texts, associated with the other queens, sometimes described as a kind of dark counterpoint to a holy feminine principle. The Kabbalistic system is deeply concerned with mirror images, with the idea that every holy thing has its shadow on the other side. And Eisheth functions as one of those shadows. Where there's a sacred feminine presence associated with the divine, Eisheth is the inversion, the corrupted, the consuming, the version that takes instead of gives. And that brings us to the thing I actually want to leave you with tonight, because I think it's the real payoff of this whole bonus episode. Why 4 queens? Why did this tradition feel the need to divide the dark feminine into 4 crowned figures, each with her own domain? Now, here's my read for whatever a horror podcaster writer's word, kind of read is worth. The 4 queens aren't 4 monsters. They're a roadmap of vulnerability. Think about what they cover, kind of taken together. Lilith, the bedroom, the night, the newborn, the moment you're asleep and defenseless. Naamah, desire, seduction, the corruption that comes through pleasure, and again, the threat to the children. Agrat, the outdoors, the road, the open air, the dangerous night when you're away from the safety of home. And Eisheth, the soul itself, the afterlife, the part of you that was supposed to outlast everything. Put them together, and you've got the entire territory of human fear carved up and crowned. Asleep, you face Lilith. Tempted, you face Naamah. Traveling, you face Agrat. And dead, or worse than dead, you face Eisheth. There is no part of the human experience that one of these 4 doesn't own. They are collectively a complete answer to the question, what should you be afraid of? And the answer the tradition gives us is everything. At every stage, there's a queen for each. And that's kind of the genius of it. Lilith gets the fame, but Lilith alone is just a night demon. It's the 4 of them together that form something bigger, a complete dark cartography of everything that can go wrong from the cradle to beyond the grave. And 3 of those 4 queens spend their entire existence standing in the shadow of the famous one. Tonight, at least, they got to step into the light. Naamah, Agrat Bat Mahlat, and Eisheth Zenunim. Now you know their names. Try not to use them too loudly. And again, go read Night Crew 2, because, we get to see the team kind of face off against them. That's it for the Night Crew podcast and the true end of the Succubus series. 5 episodes deep, and I'm glad I went back for these 3. They deserved more than a name drop. And I think we did them justice. At least as much justice as a horror writer, podcaster who is very much not a rabbi can do. I'll say it one more time for the road. If you want the real depth of Kabbalah, go to the actual scholars. I'm just a guy who turns the lights down and tells you the spooky version with hopefully a little bit of comedy in there. Reminders before I let you go. Signed books and merch are at bradricks.com. Night Crew 3 Hunting Ground is out. And Dead Mountain is on pre-order coming out October 13th. You're going to hear me talk a lot more about Dead Mountain as we get closer. Catch me on Facebook in the group Brad Ricks' Book Crypt. And the best thing you can do for this show is share an episode with one person. If each of you share one episode with one person, and then that person shares with another person, and the next thing you know, I have conquered the world. Maybe especially do it for this series. It was a fun one. And, it was a good little labor of love and a labor of not sleeping well. And I'd love for it to find more ears. Now, I'm Brad Ricks, reminding you to stay out of graveyards after dark, question people who don't show up in mirrors. And tonight, If you're heading out and you happen to be listening to this on like a Wednesday night and the air feels a little too still and a little too watchful, maybe just stay in. Order something. Lock up. Let Agrat ride right on past your door. I mean, she's got like 18 myriads of other places to be. Until next time, keep your curtains drawn, your sense of humor sharp, and your blood inside your body. Thanks for listening.